I just wanted to start off by talking about how you are a poet, you're a writer, you're an activist, you write children's books, you've written your own biography. Do you believe that poetry coming into your life was a form of self-expression and mental guidance?
It's interesting, you know, my mother said that as soon as I started using language, I started using it in a kind of poetic way. And what she meant was, like, when I heard words that sounded similar, I played little games with them. So words that basically rhymed. And if a word had, if a group of words had a particular rhythm, I would kind of repeat the rhythms all the time. Now, some people could call that poetry. I used to call it playing with words. I thought that I just loved playing with words. And it's interesting, there was a time when, I'm sorry, I can't remember how old I was, but I was really small. And my mother said that she was thinking of sending me to a child psychiatrist because the books on child development said I should be playing with toys now, I should be playing with guns and stuff like that. But I could just sit in the corner and play with words in my head. And I'd be just sitting in the corner going, yeah, nice rhythm, yeah. But my mother thought it was a sign of me kind of breaking up. So I just love playing with words. And I guess, first of all, it was just fun with words. First of all, it was just having fun with words for the sake of it. And then, when I started to understand what the people were saying on the TV and the news, I realised that there were people in the world that were starving. There were people in the world that were kind of being made into refugees, and there were people in the world who had the same colour skin as me, but didn't have freedom. And there were people in my country that had the same colour skin as me, and they were being beaten up because of the colour of their skin. So then my poetry got really political, because I just felt I had to say something about it. And the interesting thing is that there are no black British people on television. You know, we see black Americans all the time. We see Muhammad Ali, the boxer, and Martin Luther King, and people like that. I mean, even after they died, we were still seeing images of them. But there's no one British to relate to. So my poetry it had the rhythm of Jamaica, the rhythm of my mother's country, but with the kind of content of my experience. And I just started doing this because I felt I wanted to say something about what was going on in the world. I didn't call it politics at the time. I didn't say it's political poetry or anything like that. I mean, I started kind of doing this, we call it toasting, it's like rapping on kind of reggae sound systems. I started doing that. And then I kind of went slightly off the rails. I got involved in crime, and in those days, they didn't have prison libraries like they have now. I mean, I have an organisation called Haven Distribution, and what we do is we give prisoners books. We send books into prisons. There was nothing like that. There was no libraries when I was in prison. The only thing we were allowed was the Bible and pornography. I always wondered why those two things, the Bible and pornography. So people laugh when I say this, but it's absolutely true. I did a lot of thinking in prison. And I remember thinking, I'm really angry at society, but I'm not doing anything sitting in the prison. This is not fighting society. This is not fighting the Great Babylon. This is not doing anything. And so I remember when they used to come out of prison, they used to the prison officers, we used to call them screws. They used to play this game with you. They say, oh well, I'll give you 8 months and you'll be back. I'll give you 10 months and you'll be back. And one screw said to me, "I'll give you 6 months and you'll be back." And I said, "I might be back, but the next time it will be political." You know, and what I meant was, it's not going to be criminal, basically. It's going to be something that I believe in. So it's possible that I do come back. But the next time I come back, it'll be on a principled stand that I'm taking. And it was funny because I remember him looking at me, and there's a part of me that wonders, did he not quite understand the answer, or was he just showing me respect? Because he went, "Jolly good, jolly good." And it was difficult at the time because when I left prison, you can imagine it's the 70s. I'm a Rastafarian, black, with a prison record, trying to get a job, and it was really difficult. I felt like I was almost pushed into crime again. And I did do some crime, but it was more like crime behind the scenes. And then one day I woke up and I just went, "I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore." Now, I remember when I was 8 years old. Sorry, I'm not being very chronological here. I remember when I was 8 years old, I kind of closed my eyes and I imagined what I wanted to do when I grew up. There's a story in my book, and I'm sure you know it, about when the guy asked me, "What do I want to do when I grow up?" And I said, "I want to be a poet." And he said, "Have you ever seen a poet skin a rabbit?" You know, this is a military man. And I remember thinking, I've never seen anybody skin a rabbit, and I don't really want to. That doesn't mean I'm a man. It doesn't prove I'm a man because I can skin a rabbit. But I remember kind of closing my eyes once when I was about 8 years old and imagining what I wanted to be. And I thought, yeah, I want to be a poet. And I want to be a poet that does poetry that's musical and political and spiritual at the same time. And at the same time, it could be funny. And then I want to use my poetry. And if I get well known, I'm going to use my notoriety or my fame, whatever you want to call it. I want to use that to better other people. And I want to stick up for women. And I want to do this. And I want to help other minority groups, etc., etc. And I had this like real, I can remember the day I did it. And then I just had to get on with life. So there I was like 20, 21 or something like that, looking like I'm going back to prison. And then I just kind of closed my eyes and remember when I was 8 years old, that dream I had. And I went, right. This was Birmingham. I was growing up in Birmingham at the time. I left Birmingham and I went to London. Sometimes I tell this story in schools and I say, well, I was involved in gangs in Birmingham. But then I went to London and I got involved in another gang. But this was a gang of poets, musicians, creative people. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So I think we need human beings. Human beings need each other. Technically, we are pack animals. Well, I guess technically some people who are experts on this would say we're not pack animals, we're social animals. But we like other people around us. We like to connect. We like conversation, we like touch, we like narratives. And so you could argue that, young people that go into gangs, that's what they're doing. They're just finding a pack.
I think it's so interesting that you're speaking about kind of the connection with self-manifestation from a young age, knowing what you want and having that connection with self, and then kind of finding yourself in a space where you're finding your gang, but it's through poetry, it's through language, and so emotive language is, as you know, how we teach people how to describe and understand their emotions through language. And I wanted to ask you, how far do you believe that emotive language has a impact on self-expression, and emotional literacy has an impact on being able to express yourself?
Right. Well, I had a friend once, I have his book here actually, called Ricardo, and he had a very sad life. And sorry, again, I've got to be political, but there was a dictator called Pinochet in Chile. Pinochet was notorious because he took a football stadium, the national football stadium of Chile, and he just kept all these political prisoners there and tortured them. And his mother was one. So he watched his mother being tortured. He watched his mother being raped. And he saw his mother kill a rapist one day and then be killed. So he grew up with that. He came to Britain and he was like a really tortured soul. I helped him publish his first book of poetry. And one day he basically took an overdose and called me. And as he called me, he said, I'm going. As he called me, he was dying. In those days, there was no mobile phones, but I had 2 phones in my house, 2 landlines. So I called the police on the other one, and there was a couple of other people in the room, and we got them to do a trace because I didn't know his address. And they traced him where he was in Cambridge, and I just kept talking to him. And they said to me, keep him talking, keep him talking. And I could hear them banging the door, and they got in, and they saved him. He went to hospital, he got sick, he got better, then he got unwell again, and one day he called me. I was actually leaving, you know, I was going somewhere, and I couldn't speak to him. You know, I kind of had a plane to catch kind of thing, and not kind of thing, I had a plane to catch to go to South Africa. So I arrived in South Africa, and as I arrived at the desk in the hotel, I could see them whispering, you know, when I gave them my name and everything, and they called the manager out, and the manager came out and said, I've got some bad news for you. We have a message that your friend Ricardo, blah, blah, blah. I was like, shh. And then I found out, and this is the answer to your question, he left a message for me that said he just run out of words. He just run out of words to try and describe how he's feeling. And as a poet, yeah, and I understood exactly what he meant. Yeah.
There are no words.
Yeah, yeah. And so he just felt that he had nowhere else to go. And I gotta say that I felt really bad, because then I started thinking, I should have taken that call, you know, I would have saved him. But everybody else said, no, you don't know, you probably would have saved him that time, but you know, you saved him before. But I still felt rather guilty about it. But that thing about running out of words, and he was a very descriptive, deep poet. But he felt that he had nowhere to go, he had no way of expressing himself. And, you know, sorry, I'm going to talk about suicide again, but in our world, in the world of show business, I use the term lightly, sometimes people wonder why it is that people take their own lives, sometimes after a really good concert, a really great show. I mean, they're standing on stage, everybody going, we love you, we love you, we love you. And then they go back to their hotel room and take their own life. You know why? Because you go from one extreme to the other. You go from this, and I've felt it before. I've never felt the need to take my life, but I felt it before. I felt like, oh, things are going wrong and nobody loves me. Like all these people going, we love you, Benjamin, we love you. And I go back to my hotel room and I go, oh my God. Sometimes I can hear them outside the hotel having a good time, and I'm going, oh my God. Now, fortunately for me, I've had a real strong reliance on yoga, Tai Chi and meditation, which is really healthy. I've never messed with drugs. I've seen people in this business, I'm talking about legal and illegal drugs now. I remember I had a friend in a well-known band, very big, popular band. He had to take a drug to put him to sleep. Then he had to take a drug to wake up. He had to take a drug to go to the toilet. When he's on stage, he's really energetic. He had to take a drug to get him hyped up to go on stage. When he came off stage, he had to take a drug to calm down. you know. And I just thought, what kind of an existence is that?
That leads on to my next question, actually, is what does mental health mean to you, Benjamin Zephaniah?
What does mental health mean to me? Well, it means taking into consideration the state of my mind, the condition of my mind, just like the condition of my foot, or my hand, or my arm, or my leg, or whatever. And sometimes I think the mind can get overloaded. And so sometimes you have to kind of take some of the load off. And, you know, people have different ways of doing that. It depends on the subject as well. It may be that you've got to kind of talk to friends. It may be that you need to kind of meditate. Sometimes it means that you've got to take a holiday. Whatever it is that's good for your mind. I mean, what's good for your legs is probably different to what's good for my legs. What's good for your back is different to what, you know. So what's good for your mind is different to what's good for my mind. Myself, I find that I can take a lot of pressure in terms of work, and I can do a lot of things at the same time. But every day I've got to have at least an hour, for myself. And when I say myself, I like to separate the my and self. Myself. And so that could be a mix. Usually it is with me a mixture of physical and mental exercise. I like to push my body to the limit and then say, right, I've done the body bit, now the mind bit. So, you know, mental health for me is just like dental health.
Yeah.
Or I can't quite think of the word for chiropody health or something like that. You know, leg health. You know what I mean? It's just so. When I get up in the morning, I tell myself that I've got to give some time to my body and my mind. And this is just me. No phones, no anything. That's why in my house I have a confession, I've got 2 purpose-built gyms. One small one and one very large one. And that's what I do there. I push myself to the limits physically. When I know I'm functioning all right then, I sit down and I say, I want to think of nothing except breathing. And I want to get down to a state of mind where the only thing I'm thinking about is breathing. And then I want to breathe without thinking. And sometimes I can do that, and I know when I've done that, I was going to say right, but there's no right way really, but I know when I've done that to a satisfactory way, it's when I get up and I think that was a great 10 minutes of meditation, and I look and it's been like 45 minutes. Because I know that it's not sleeping, and it's not thinking. The mind is awake and alert, but it's not processing contracts. It's not processing messages from other people that want a piece of me. My mind is in a state of meditation and is connecting with the rest of the universe that it's a part of. I think it's really important to understand how powerful you are, but also understand your limitations, and sometimes you've got to stop and refuel. And I know there's a particular problem with men opening up, because I know loads of men that will just not talk about stuff. And sometimes that's about the culture they come out of, whether that's kind of ethnic culture or just kind of working culture. It's really interesting though, you know, my mother came from Jamaica and she worked in the health service. And at one point she worked in mental health.
Oh, did she?
Yeah, she worked in mental health. It's interesting that, I'm going to tell you a really sad story now. Right, my brother's son got stabbed in a party. My brother's at work. He worked for a well-known car company and he's working at night. His son gets stabbed in a party. Some people send a message to his brothers now, or my brother's bigger sons, yeah, to tell them, hey, your brother's got stabbed in a party, man, come over, do something about it. So they get up out of bed, they jump in the car, and on the way to the party, they hear that their younger brother has been moved from the party to a hospital. My brother's been told at work that his son's been stabbed, so he does the same thing. He puts down his tools and he goes to the hospital. On the way to the hospital, there's a crash. So my brother comes out and looks at the crash. He looks around, there's a few people around like there usually is, you know. Then he starts to turn around to go back to his car to get to the hospital. Somebody said to him, where are you going? He said, I've got to see my son, he's in the hospital just down the road. He said, but your sons are in this car too. He couldn't believe it. He looked in the car and it was his two sons in the car. One had died, one had his pelvis smashed and his eye broken. You could imagine what my brother, and this brother of mine, he's kind of car worker, bloody macho man. And there's very little that breaks him down. Couldn't believe it. In one night, one son blinded, pelvis smashed, another son dead, another son stabbed. And at one point, two sons were in the hospital and they didn't even realise they were in the same hospital. My brother couldn't tell them that your brother's next door. So he was like depressed, he couldn't go to work. He tried counselling, it wasn't doing him very good, he just didn't know how to deal with it. My mother, like I said, worked as a mental health nurse, said, why isn't Trevor calling me anymore? Why isn't he not coming round? I said, Mum, come on, he's really struggling. You know what happened to him. Tell him to pull himself together, he's a man. I said, seriously, that's what my mother said. And 20 minutes later, my mother is watching EastEnders or something. And somebody's having some emotional drama in EastEnders and my mother goes, oh, isn't that a shame? And I go, Mum, your own son. You know, you can't identify with, you know, your trauma your own son's going through, and there's this fictional character on the TV that you're connected with.
Yeah. Do you believe that a freedom of expression of mental health is linked with privilege?
Well, put it like this, I've seen some people who, if they were poor, the way they acted, they would happen to be rich. If they were poor, they would be sectioned or something, you know, or they certainly would be called mad. But because they're rich, they're called eccentric. Mm. You know, I've seen that many times. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and I know it's a bit of a cliche word, but I do think society and societies, groups of communities, have to be more emotionally intelligent, you know? Mm. Like I say, it's a bit of a cliche word, but some people just don't have any. You know, my mother is a nurse. She did all the physical stuff nursing. She worked in a operating theatre. She worked in a mental health ward. But when it comes to emotional intelligence, this is my dear mother, I love her very much. She doesn't get it. She really doesn't get it. You know, man must be man and just do what you do. You know, and if you've got something wrong, you know, you must trust Jesus. That's it. Yeah, so we are really lucky to a certain extent in our immediate family. We haven't had any serious mental health issues. One of my brothers at one point was going downhill, and my mother thought it was, you know, purely financial. When he gets a job, he'll be all right. Now, he managed to get a job, but his job didn't bring him total happiness. But my mum can't see it because she says he's got a car, he's okay now. Mm. I know the Jamaican and some other sections of the Caribbean community very well. So I think, you know, there's lots of writers like J.J. Bowler and people like that who are writing about the way that black men think and the way we should take care of ourselves and the way that we should relate to our women and our partners and all our sexuality or whatever it is, in a completely different way from our parents. And so there is kind of hope, because people of that generation as well, hopefully, will be kind of educating themselves and getting involved in the mental health services and things like that.
Considering the here and now, where there's a systematic underfunding in the NHS, specifically for the mental health branch, and the funding for the mental health kind of support in the UK, what impacts do you feel like this will have on the people of the UK, people of Britain?
I kind of smile a little bit because I know you're really young, but I can remember Margaret Thatcher and the thing called care in the community, which I remember at the time sounded so great. I went, oh, care in the community, that sounds so wonderful. Yeah, we do care in the community. And then I realised it was actually not caring for people and just leaving them in the community. And kind of that's where it started, in a sense. I got to tell you, I'm an anarchist, you know. I don't really believe in government. And I think the reason why most people can't imagine anarchy now is because we are so programmed into this way of doing things. The government gives us a certain amount of money. We set up little centres. They could be community centres, they could be hospitals, they could be all kinds of things, but we set them up, and it's all depending on the money that the government give us. And we do that. We can't imagine taking back control of our politics, just like a lot of people can't imagine taking back control of our spirituality. There was, in fact, human beings, I'm no historian, but I'm pretty confident in saying this, human beings have survived longer on the earth without governments and without churches than we've had governments and churches. But in the small time that we've had governments and churches, we've brainwashed ourselves so much we can't imagine life without them. We've just lacking confidence. We don't have the confidence to go back to that anymore. Now, I've been to places in the world where there's very little government. I was on the border of Kenya and Tanzania not so long ago. I asked the people about, how they interact with government and law and stuff, and they go, we don't see them down here. We look after our own lives. And when I describe what I think of as a kind of anarchy, they went, well, that's what we have here. They said, we don't have any police, we police ourselves. We don't have any housing, government, local government housing people. We make the houses for ourselves. We don't allow anybody to be homeless. Somebody's homeless in our village, the village stops, make a home for that person. And then once the home is finished, they move on. So I pointed to a little boy, a young teenager, and I said, what happens if that boy does a crime? This is what a Westerner would, an obvious question from a Western point of view. What would happen if that boy did a crime? And they said, if that boy did a crime, the first place we would go to is his family and ask him, what is the problem? Why is he like this? Are you connecting with him? Have you disconnected with him? And whatever it is, they go and deal with that first. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. They said, we come back to the boy way down the line.
It's that sense of community.
Yes.
that completely surrounds a person. And I think that's how, I wonder how you feel, how far the community's kind of views and the people that surround the individual, the way that we're teaching children emotive language and emotional literacy, how that plays a role in the way that and that reflects the way that they are able to express their emotions and speak about their mental health.
Well, yeah, I don't think they are given a language to speak about their mental health. It's interesting that now, when I was a kid, I had a thing called sex education. When I had sex education, I did it with chickens. Seriously, we had it with chickens. And we had a chicken, I had to write a letter, and you could take the chicken home. A little chicken was born, a little chick was born. That's how we had sex explained to us, And I had a little chicken called Jeannie, I took her home. And And then they moved on from that and they actually started doing, you know, proper sex education. And now they do relationship studies, something like this, you know. And I think we've got to kind of do the same thing when we talk about our bodies, you know. One of the first things we teach our children is, you know, how to go to the toilet and then how to clean their teeth and all that kind of stuff. And I think we've also got to teach them how to deal with their mental health, how to talk about it, you know, at school, so they can talk to their parents about it and talk to their friends about it. Just find the kind of language that can, you know, that to express themselves. I'm no expert in it, but I do know that children can be very articulate once they're given the tools to talk about their feelings. If they haven't got the tools, they just shut up. They just clam up. And it's a bit like, you know, somebody saying, okay, build a house, but I'm not giving you any tools. You just kind of look at the ground and you'll think, look at the bricks and you go, how do I do this? But if somebody teaches you and shows you and gives you the tools, then you can do it. If somebody says, look, you know, you have a brain, there's a physical thing called a brain, yeah, and it's like this. I didn't realise until recently that the brain is not a solid thing. It's like blancmange. And inside that brain you have electricity. Yeah, there's actual electricity. When you're being creative, you know, it sparks up. Yeah, and in there are emotions. Now the thing with emotions is that we look in the brain, we're limited to what we can see emotionally. There's certain bits light up. But the person that can really tell us how you feel is you. And here are the words. You know.
How much of an impact do you think, with the growing understanding of emotive language and the growing understanding of mental health, how much of an impact do you think this is going to have in leading the next generations into understanding themselves?
Well, I think we have a real societal we've come to a kind of crossroads at the moment. Because if you look around the world, what tends to be happening with a lot of people who are in so-called power is that I don't really care about what language they use to refer to people. Referring to refugees as swarms, calling, just using negative terms for all different kinds of groups of people. But at the same time, I see younger people that are not doing that, you know. I find here that my students are just kind of hypersensitive, you know, in a very positive way, you know, to, and I think they're so used to people who want to identify in different ways. Yeah, so not so long ago I said to my students, I want you to get up and say a little bit about yourself and read a poem. And out of about 30 students, I would say probably 10 of them were what we would call straight. All the others were something, you know, trans, binary, fluid, gender fluid. And it just wasn't an issue. It was just so normal for them. And I guess because I'm teaching performance poetry, I'm not teaching poetry like teaching Keats or Shakespeare. I'm teaching them how to express themselves through poetry. I do think there are still some dinosaurs around who use very emotive language to describe people. I mean, negatively. And but I'd like to think that that's going to change with the generation coming up. Do I sound really optimistic? I just, you see, I think society moves in tides. At the moment, we're getting really uncaring. Government doesn't care about mental health, doesn't care about certain kind of thing. But I think there'll be a backlash against that.
We were speaking earlier about how young people are really kind of understanding their mental health, and it's going towards a really positive direction. How do you feel we are better able to support young people with mental health issues?
Well, the simple answer to that, of course, is for us, who are not so young, to be kind and more understanding and all that kind of stuff. But the reality of it is that we do need a mental health service that is funded and caring and can accommodate these people. I believe that food is medicine. I believe, you've got to start taking care of yourself. That, going to the hospital is the last thing you should be doing. And I think there's a kind of false economy if the National Health Service just waits for you to be sick. So actually, I think there should be like a whole department in the National Health Service dedicated to keeping people out of hospital. You know what I mean? That's their main job. And not in saying that, there's no beds for you or anything like that. Making sure that you are healthy. But the problem is, you see, I've made commercials for television and they cost a lot of money, right? But I've never seen a really beautiful commercial with a top superstar model, beautiful hunky guy advertising broccoli. Never seen it, right? But we know broccoli is one of the most healthiest things you can eat. We know that. That's scientifically proven. The National Health Service know that. But, humble little vegetables, there's no massive multinational companies promoting them. That's what the National Health Service should be doing. Yeah. I asked a friend of mine who's a doctor, I said to him, and this doctor is a vegan, and he was telling me, that when patients come, a lot of the time you have to say to them, can you cut down on meat and, do more exercise? And I said to him, why do you never say, stop eating meat? And he pointed to his desk and he had door stops and paperweights and stuff like that, and they've all got company names on them. He said, this company supplies drugs. They also own butchers and meat processing companies and stuff like this. And I'm like, my gosh, they make you sick and then they give you the tablets to make you feel better. He said, we can't just say outright, stop eating meat, because it's not in the companies, it's not in the drug company's interest. And right now, drugs is a market. We've got to learn to take care of ourselves. And I always say that if we can't have governments that really, their first priority is taking care of us, then we've got to do it ourselves.
These things are happening in the world. The coronavirus, things are happening in the world, and no one's really considering the impact that has on the people of the place. How do you feel like we can avoid making the mistakes of the past going forward, in sense of the mental health of the people?
That's an interesting question. You see, I think there's nothing wrong with making mistakes, but I think the problem is when you don't learn from them. And I think that we live in societies that are kind of so driven by profit and greed that we're not learning by our mistakes. And so all that we can do, I'm talking, okay, you're studying this area, I'm not, I'm just kind of a poet, but all I can be is just just be as compassionate to people as possible. I can listen to people as much as possible.
What do you believe your essence brings to the world?
I would like to think open-mindedness. And the ability to change and turn your life around. I think that's the biggest message in my autobiography, for example. You know, did some really bad things once and, you know, born on the wrong side of town and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, we've heard that before, Benjamin. But what are you going to do about it? But what I did about it was I got RT. You know, I found a way of expressing myself. And that kind of saved me. In a sense, I really do believe that kind of art saved me. But yeah, I don't expect everybody to agree with me, but I expect people to say, wow, you know, at least he's speaking his mind and he's telling his truth. And I hope that would inspire them to speak their mind and tell their truth.